Welcome to Cracking Conflict, a 15-episode series on the Fearlessly Human podcast. I'm Kavita Khanna, a leadership and culture strategist, coming to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
And I'm Dr. Vicki Dalton, a clinical and forensic psychologist tuning in from Indianapolis in the US of A. Welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, Cracking Conflict. This is episode 11, and today we're going to go into a deeper dive of collaborative problem solving. In our last episode, we challenged the idea that agreement equals safety. In this one, we are going to explore what happens after the disagreement, how to work with somebody, even when you don't fully see eye to eye.
I think this is a really important skill, isn't it? Not just in life, well, definitely in life, but in particular in the workplace. You cannot always get along with everyone, and you still want to be having positive relationships at workplace and be able to have your say about what you like or not like. So what I'm really interested in understanding is what's happening in our brains. What makes our brains more open to collaboration versus competition? What helps it shift from me versus you, unsafe versus comfortable, us versus the problem? What's that switch that we need to flick on? And I'm really hoping there is a switch.
Well, we're going to call it a skill set instead of maybe just a switch. And I think a lot of it kind of involves the mindset type of what we were talking about before. I think really normalizing the idea of conflict and normalizing the idea that we want there to be differences of opinions to have growth and to be able to challenge our ideas to make them even better. And so setting that stage to conflict is fine, and we can get to the other side of it. One of the things that I do in sort of my business model, when I'm working with my business folks, not my clinical practice, but we sort of talk about, usually you have a shared goal, right? We're all on the same team, or at least as a company, or if you're in an alliance, we have a shared goal of trying to make this successful. And being reminded of that, like our goal is to get to the other side of this conflict and to be stronger and to have a better sense of what to do about it. And so forecasting that, signaling that this is the expectation of where we go. And one of the probably important tools or tricks that you want to be able to do, I don't know that it's a key or a flip to be, switched on, but it's the idea of trying to learn from history, but leave it in the past. Don't bring those negative memories and negative experiences to the forefront, because as we talked about previously, there's a certain part of your brain that doesn't recognize that that's just memory, or try not to catastrophize about what could happen negatively, because your brain doesn't know that that's imagination. It thinks it's happening, and it starts sending these signals that cause more of those emotional responses. So the grounding kind of things is, we want to get to the other side of this bridge, and we're going to do it together. And it may not be as easy as walking across it by ourselves, but we will be stronger by doing it together. And so sort of setting that stage and that piece, normalizing the idea that we're going to have disagreements, encouraging, if you can be the one to practice more of encouraging, this is my thought, this is my belief. I want us to figure out where the problem lies, and let's figure it out together. So signaling the together.
Yeah, so what I've heard so far is being aware of the negative patterns, but leaving it in the past so that it's not trapping you, which is what you've been saying all along. Mm-hmm. And then taking charge of the conversation, as it were, by leading and saying, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I disagree with. And that will give the person a sense of, my brain can now be in control and move to problem solving. Have I got that right?
Yep. And signaling to them, sometimes when I'm working in an active conflict, and somebody's engaged in one of those cognitive distortions we'll talk more about later, they they are in a different headspace, and we got to bring them back to the problem solving space. And so sometimes we even like, okay, let's say this fear of yours is accurate. What do we do about it? What would be the next step? Where do we go with this? And sometimes you still have to pull them out of the catastrophizing, and then you pull them back. But what would we do? How would we fix it? What would that look like? How would we know? You start asking questions that encourage them to start thinking about the future in a problem solving approach rather than but what if this happens kind of a fear based kind of piece. I'm curious about sort of in the traditional conflict resolution model that seems to be sort of taught. I feel like they really miss a lot of the human element that we all bring to the table. What are the things that we really need to explore with that I think that sometimes people miss? They try to want to make it more robotic. And we bring ourselves to that room and to that table. And if you can kind of lean a little bit more in caveat into the idea of what are the things that really stop us from collaborating well? What are those blockers that we might describe?
I think I'll go into two ways of conflict resolution that I have seen in the workplace, and I'll call these traditional, and then we'll switch to what's truly traditional or what's really human to us, what comes naturally to us, which is restricted. So remembering that workplaces are artificial constructs where we are coming together, and yes, we may have a common purpose, but we're also required to behave in a certain way. And sometimes that just means that when conflict arises, it's seen as a thing to solve. So in that situation, essentially there are two paths. One is a legalistic path, for lack of a better word, which means that you are standing by a set of rules. So these are the company rules, or these are the laws of the land. You have flouted these. Here's the remedy. And the remedy may be a process, which you'll find a lot in the let's say the Australia, New Zealand setup. We have a whole bunch of processes to go through to make sure that conflict is resolved. And there is a lot of onus on the employer to make sure that happens. Now, those things per se, they talk about listening, they talk about consulting. All of them are good things. They are about making the person feel heard, but it still becomes a legalistic process. You've done this, tick. You've done this other thing, tick. You've done the third thing, tick. Awesome. Now, is the conflict solved? Of course it isn't. And it's the same when you look at the training that's given. Because people are kind of thinking and relying on the process to sort it for them. Because process feels safe. So you're not leaning into the empathy side of things. You're not leaning into the discomfort of knowing this might turn out bad, and I'll still give it a go. I'll still work through it because we want to de-risk everything. So that's the legalistic side of things. The other side is, and I've been banging on and on about this. This is this concept that disagreement, conflict is bad, and agreement, harmony, alignment is good. And that's rife in the workplace. It's there in every management literature. It's not intended to be that, but people read too literally into what's given. So the literal translation of alignment means we're all moving together in the same direction. What's not said is, in order to get there, you have to rub up against each other. You have to really test to come up with a good solution. So in terms of workplace collaboration, then the traditional resolution model when it comes to conflicts or disagreement really misses the point that we're dealing with irrational people. We're all irrational. And there has to be a space in terms of being okay with getting it wrong. And there isn't that space in the workplace. So sometimes that becomes a problem. It's just the context. In families, you're saddled with the family. You're born into it, so you don't have a choice. Um, but in the workplace, it's you kind of either you leave or you work in a different department or the relationship is broken. So the stakes become high and the risk is higher. Now, it's not entirely hopeless because uh, people are naturally empathetic, which is why the setting and the leaders playing a really important role in allowing uh, people to voice disagreement, to say this is the way we go, and to set those ground rules. These are really basic things, but they are something that I stand by in terms of setting the scene and also calling to account when it doesn't. You do
when
it
it doesn't.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when I'm doing a lot of my, we'll call it co-parent coaching, the co-parents that are no longer married but have a child and have to make decisions together. It's like a strained collaboration all the time. At least the ones that come to see me. By definition, there's lots of folks who do it well. But the collaborative problem solving is really an important piece, right? That word collaborative, we're doing this together. Technically, when there's conflict, there's like one of 4 ways to resolve it. I get you to agree with me. I end up agreeing with you. We have a third party, like the legal system or a tie-breaking vote kind of a thing, or we come up with something new together. That collaborative, in the legal world, it might be mediation, where we're both giving something to get to the end goal. But it's that collaborative process that matters. And when I'm in my clinical setting and I'm talking with my individual clients, it's a common thing for them to want me to tell them what to do. Just tell me what to do. And I'm like, I can, but it's got to be your plan. You've got to buy into it. It's got to be collaborative. So let's get there together. Now, I'm not saying that I don't sometimes guide them to a certain direction, but it's got to be done together because they're the one walking out here implementing the plan. And so I kind of liked what you said about the definition of alignment is moving forward together, but it's a little messy sometimes getting to the alignment place, right? It may make my engineers out there a little extra twitchy, hearing that, but it's not necessarily a smooth process, and that's okay. So understanding doing it together, really listening and understanding those pieces, but the shared emotional ownership of the answer, of the solution, is actually a really effective piece for the collaborative problem solving to be successful. That sense of joint ownership.
Yeah, there was another thing I did mean to mention, which is in terms of conflict at the workplace or within the workplace, what happens is when there is disagreement or when there is, let's say, 2 different opinions, it seems more often than not a win-lose situation, and the problem solving is focused on finding who's right and who's wrong. As much as we can step away from that judgmental thinking and get into a place of you can be right, maybe not this time, or you can be wrong in another setting. It's that judgmental, retributive kind of approach to something is right, something is wrong, that really gets in the way of collaboration. I don't know if that's been your experience.
It's been my experience, and it kind of goes back to our previous podcast about sort of respectful disagreement. I work with some incredibly intelligent and competitive and high achieving individuals. And it's that competitiveness that it gets them to the top of their profession and their field. So finding a way to, honor that, respect that, but recognize that you have to be able to table that urge of, I want to win. The win is a collective win. And acknowledging that competitive nature is actually a good thing. How do we use it in a collaborative kind of a way? And that kind of brings us back to some of our older conversations about how do you get someone to speak up when they don't have that same competitive sort of urge, but they have a good opinion to bring to the table. So it's getting the buy-in. This is a decision we came to together. Let's try and implement it together, versus that risk of what you're talking about of somebody essentially undermining the success of it because they felt like they lost. And it kind of brings me back to an analogy that when someone walks out of a meeting and they're mad and they hope this fails, kind of a concept. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like saying, I hope this pilot crashes this plane because we're all going down together. Well, we can look at it that way, right? So we're in this together. And I have found sometimes that acknowledging that competitive piece and acknowledging it with grace and respect, but then asking them to kind of check those urges and to bring to the table, how do we use that in a positive kind of a way, tends to bring down that risk of the walking out of that meeting with a feeling of like they lost and a risk of undermining.
Yeah.
So the joint ownership piece is what we come back to.
Yes. And in my leadership work, this is something that I've found when I bring together teams and they are still new to each other, or they've had a history of not having agreed with each other, and that happens often. Walking them through something important, something meaningful, something that's got high stakes for all the parties involved, and it really solves the problem for them. So in some ways, problem solving can become a tool for better trust. And I'm thinking back to working on the Canterbury earthquake project. It was a high tension project. People had been working late, long hours, and also living in quite an earthquake destroyed city. And yet, somehow, because the work was worthwhile and because everyone was suffering equally, it made the problem less of a problem. It made the disagreements help achieve a better solution, as it were. And this is exactly what happened during COVID when we went into level 4 lockdown. It was a team of 4 million or 5 million. And we were all together. I mean, it was an experiment that went slightly longer than it should have, but definitely the country could, because we were all suffering. All of us were stuck and we were suffering. So there's something about common pain or common gain.
Yeah, common experiences, right? That what builds relationships over the course of time is time and experiences, right? And so you were experiencing similar, maybe different, pieces of it, but yet, so that brought it to a level of collaboration that really impacted. And I think you brought up an incredibly important piece. There was a strong belief in the cause we were doing it for, right? That there was an alignment in the need of the problem needed to be solved. So we've brought up several important sort of topics. I kind of want to re-highlight a couple of things. This collaborative piece, being able to get the meeting, the conversation, the team to a place of collaboration, and not sort of being judgmental, in that process, but recognizing that we're going to be human. And when people have those emotions, and you said something earlier that makes me, laugh, that by definition, almost all emotions are irrational. And if you don't have emotions, we usually give you a diagnosis. So there's something that's not normal about that. And so normalizing the emotions and the rationality, recognizing those cognitive distortions that cause us to have a filter, like taking things personal in those pieces, and recognize what role you play in it, and recognize your own risk, are really important pieces of the skills that you can skill up in your toolbox that will help you manage these pieces better and to be a meaningful team member that helps with that collaborative process.
Yeah, collaboration isn't really a soft skill. In fact, I'm going to ban the words soft skill because these are all power skills. They are powerful skills to have. Collaboration is strategic, and it is really a skill to have in your toolkit if you want to build relationships and be successful. So, in our next episode, we'll talk about stories that trip us up in conflict and how to rewrite them. So, going back to the distortions that Vicky loves so much, but we're going to do a real deep dive, and we'll really try and understand what those are. And by the time we're finished, hopefully, we'll all know equally about our distortions, though not quite as well as Vicky.
We'll see.